My name is Angelina, and at 33, I found myself standing in the living room of the home I had rescued on 3 separate occasions. The first time came after my father's back operation left him unable to earn a paycheck for months. The second happened during the market crash, when both my parents watched half their retirement savings vanish overnight. The third was just last spring, when the heating system failed right before a bitter freeze hit, and I sent the repairman the entire payment up front before my parents even thought to reach out. That particular afternoon, though, I wasn't there to solve a crisis. I was simply assisting Dad with scanning documents for their medical coverage, a task I handled regularly. My father, Gerald, had never really mastered the printer scanner machine, even a full decade after buying it. He liked to tell people I was the tech-savvy one, despite the fact that my career had been in project coordination for more than 10 years, not technology. He'd placed a pile of papers on the dining table for me. I worked through the stack efficiently: doctor reports, several Medicare documents, a couple of utility statements. Then my eyes landed on a thick, off-white envelope, carefully labeled in my mother's neat script. Estate plan, final version. I realize now I should never have looked inside. I understand that. Yet only days earlier I had covered their property taxes, $2, $178.41 exactly, and I was already mentally planning to stop at the drugstore afterward to collect their hypertension prescriptions. The way I always did. So yes, I lifted the flap. Inside lay their last will and testament, notarized just 2 months prior. The mortgage-free house, the balance of their retirement funds, a life insurance payout. Every asset directed entirely to my brother, Mason Rivers, age 29, unemployed, still residing under their roof. He had left university twice, then spent several years pursuing music, which in reality involved playing guitar in the garage and uploading videos that rarely reached even 200 plays. My parents repeatedly explained that he simply hadn't discovered his true direction yet. We love both of our children equally and trust them to look after each other. That was the only personal note, nothing about the tax payments I had made. No reference to the savings I had quietly shifted to them when they never requested it. Not a single word of gratitude. Merely a courteous phrasing that essentially declared, "You require nothing, and we are not indebted to you." At first I remained silent, simply gazing at the page as the scanner continued its low drone behind me. My fingers stayed calm, my breathing did not. If you have ever experienced betrayal from the very individuals who were supposed to champion you most, please tell me where you're reading this from. Dad returned with his mug of coffee and asked, "You making progress on that pile, Danny?" I raised the folder toward him. "Is this really the plan, Dad?" I asked softly. "Everything goes to Mason." He halted, cup suspended midway to his mouth. Then came one of his deep, weary exhales. That sound alone confirmed he had anticipated exactly what I discovered. "It isn't how it appears," he said. I stayed quiet because it appeared precisely as I feared. I didn't push him immediately. Dad simply remained standing, clutching his coffee as though it held the explanation. Eventually he muttered, "We assumed you would get it. You're successful, Angelina." "You've always been successful." That phrase was their standard reply whenever they wished to avoid further discussion. "You've always been successful," which really meant, you have no right to expect anything additional. I placed the folder back on the table and walked out to get some air. The porch swing gave a faint creak as I settled onto it. I had personally replaced that very swing 2 summers earlier. That same week the deck's railing collapsed, and I hired someone to repair it since Mason claimed he was once again short on cash. At the time, I hadn't objected. I had been brought up to handle responsibilities, to rise to the occasion. I spent my childhood in that same house, sharing a bedroom with Mason until age 13, when Dad at last completed the basement. I can still picture the afternoon we painted those basement walls blue, Dad, Mason, and me, while Mom carried out glasses of lemonade and declared, "Look at our wonderful little team. What a team it turned out to be." After graduating college, I remained in Nashville because Mom insisted she couldn't rest properly whenever I moved too far. I declined a promising position in Boston, even though it came with higher pay and a quicker path to management. I convinced myself that family took priority. They never explicitly demanded my sacrifices. They simply never informed me those sacrifices weren't necessary. There were small gestures, covering their auto insurance during lean months, purchasing groceries when food stamp renewals lagged, contacting the credit card issuer to resolve overdue charges, and larger ones, like transferring $11,000 from my own savings 4 years back to bring their mortgage current. I handled every request without hesitation. All I wanted was for them to feel protected, calm, unburdened. And yet, after everything, I had been reduced to an afterthought. I remained on that porch swing, eyes fixed on the ancient oak across the lawn. Mason had once etched his initials there, Mr. Plus HH, for a girl he dated briefly in his second year of high school. I wondered whether he had ever contributed to having that tree pruned. I wondered whether he even realized the trimming had cost $800 the previous year after a storm nearly tore it apart. Had they ever paused to consider what I had surrendered? Not merely dollars, but tranquility, opportunities, the possibility of a different existence elsewhere. Or had they simply viewed me as the person who never required prompting because I invariably appeared first? I never returned indoors. The swing creaked once more beneath my weight, then grew still. I could hear the scanner's steady hum drifting through the screen door. Moments later, Mom appeared. She had on the familiar light blue cardigan she always chose for serious conversations. The same one from the Christmas when I presented her with a gift card while Mason handed her a homemade CD. She claimed to cherish both equally. She remained standing at first, merely fidgeting with the edge of her sleeve. "Angelina," she began, neither overly gentle nor harsh. I kept my gaze downward. She took a seat beside me regardless. "We never intended for you to discover it this way." I gave a single nod. I refused to rescue her from the quiet. She exhaled, not quite a sigh, more a gentle release. "It isn't that we don't care for you." I offered no reply, because what kind of affection erases your name the moment it becomes inconvenient? She placed her hand over mine. Her palm felt warm, faintly shaking. "Mason has struggled more. You're dependable, Danny. You always have been. Dependable, solid, trustworthy." Phrases that sound affectionate until you recognize they function as restraints. Titles that permit others to draw from you without remorse. I withdrew my hand. "You could have informed me," I said, keeping my tone quiet and level. "You could have spoken to me." She turned her eyes toward the yard, and then she murmured it as though whispering lessened its weight. "We had to co-sign for Mason. He required assistance." The statement struck softly, yet I registered every implication in her delivery. They hadn't merely excluded me from the will. They had already bound themselves to him with actual figures, genuine obligations, tangible jeopardy. "How much?" I asked. Silence. "Mom, how much?" Still nothing. Then barely audible, "$35,000. I rose to my feet. A breeze had begun to stir. The antique wind chimes above the porch gave one faint chime before going quiet. I regarded her, not furious, simply exhausted. "You didn't select him because he was in need. You selected him because you were already committed to him." Her eyes widened, but I sought no reply. I simply hadn't realized the cost involved discarding me. I sent no messages. I made no calls. I simply withdrew. That week I discontinued the automatic payments I had arranged for their utilities. I removed the recurring reminder to refill their prescriptions. I suspended the weekly grocery delivery that arrived every Thursday at 4. No theatrics, no grand announcement, just a subtle withdrawal, a void where my presence once existed. I expected them to realize immediately, but 7 days went by. Silence. During the second week, the messages began. Dad texted first. "Water bill arrived higher than usual this month. Can you look at the account?" I left it unanswered. Then, "Mom, we're out of the low-sodium crackers you normally get. Mason overlooked it." I marked them unread. They weren't alarmed yet. They merely presumed I was occupied, irritable, or worn out from my job. Perhaps they believed I required a brief break. Perhaps they assumed I would return the way I always had. By the third week, the wording shifted. "Angelina," Mom wrote, "the mortgage payment is due. Can you transfer what you normally cover?" No greeting, no inquiry about my well-being. Simply a demand, an amount, an expectation. I stared at the text for a long while, then I replied, "Ask Mason, it's his house now." I pressed send without hesitation. 5 minutes later, the phone rang. I allowed it to ring out. Another text arrived. Please don't act this way, we should discuss this. But no discussion remained. They had reached their conclusion. I was merely beginning to live as though my own decisions counted. That same evening, Mason messaged, Danny, don't turn this into something huge. Just support them the way you always have. The way I always had, like habit, like instinct, like I had never been anything beyond dependable background support. I responded, they picked you, Mason, so step up and be the one they picked. No answer came. The following morning, I opened my phone to a payment request from Mom, $3,200. The precise sum of the overdue mortgage plus late charges. No accompanying words, no explanation, merely the figure. I rejected the request. Within 60 seconds, the phone rang again and again. Then the message, we might lose the house if you refuse to assist. And finally from Dad, you would allow your own parents to become homeless. I nearly laughed aloud. They were not homeless. They were merely inconvenienced. For the first time, they were experiencing the weight I had silently borne without complaint. I powered off my phone. They hadn't lost me the day they rewrote the will. They lost me the moment they assumed I would continue providing indefinitely. A full week of quiet followed my refusal of the transfer. No calls, no texts. It marked the most peaceful stretch I had known from them in ages. Strangely, that stillness rang louder than any plea. I began sleeping more soundly. Waking without instinctively reaching for notifications, preparing meals solely for myself. Yet quiet never endures long in my family, not when fault needs assigning. The initial warning arrived as a voicemail from Aunt Lori. She seldom contacted me directly. She always claimed she preferred staying neutral in family matters. Yet that morning her recording said, I'm not picking sides, sweetheart, but your mom is terribly anxious. Perhaps you could just speak with them. That confirmed they had begun sharing their version with others. I opened Facebook. It took little effort to locate the post, a picture of their front porch. The caption, we poured our entire lives into our children, yet sometimes pouring is never sufficient. Scores of likes, several sympathetic replies. One from Mason, certain individuals believe family revolves around finances. They overlook that it's really about being present. I exited the application, not enraged, merely empty. They weren't simply hurt. They were reshaping the narrative, transforming me from supporter into betrayer simply because I ceased being available for exploitation. The following afternoon, an unmarked envelope arrived at my apartment. Plain exterior, no sender details. Inside, a photocopy of a foreclosure warning. Not addressed to me, yet the property address was unmistakable. I held the document for a moment, studied it, then turned it over and wrote across the reverse. Perhaps you should have willed it to someone capable of maintaining it. I never mailed it back. Instead, I visited the county website. The home had been officially flagged as delinquent. Payments overdue, no reserves remaining. They had exhausted the savings, likely attempting to preserve appearances, perhaps expecting I would relent before reality struck. Mason had depleted it completely. Every cent intended for their security, for stability, for his tomorrow, vanished. Once upon a time, I would have intervened, phoned the lender, arranged an extension, shifted money to cover the gap. Instead, I filled a glass with water, sat down at my kitchen table, and permitted the house to slip away without my intervention. Sometimes you don't ignite the blaze. You simply cease hauling the buckets. It began subtly. A cryptic post from Mom featuring a sunflower emoji, a snapshot of her and Dad smiling on the porch. We nurtured them with devotion. We gave our utmost, yet occasionally devotion falls short. No direct names, no explicit blame, but I recognized the intent. So did anyone familiar with our situation. Aunt Trish replied, you both are incredible parents, you deserve far more. Dad posted next, less veiled. We invested everything in our children, hours, resources, affection. We believed we instilled proper values. Ultimately, however, you cannot dictate who decides to abandon you. He tagged me. No phone call, no private note, just a public statement for all to view. I offered no reply. I observed the reactions accumulate, dozens of likes, relatives and acquaintances joining in, some I hadn't encountered since high school. One commented, today's young people fail to grasp the meaning of sacrifice, and naturally Mason weighed in. He reposted Dad's message with his own addition. Certain individuals only value family when it benefits them. I would sacrifice anything to shield mom and dad. Apparently not everyone shares that perspective. I read his words twice, then a third time. The same person who hadn't contributed rent in years, who had emptied their remaining funds, who observed the home deteriorate, was now casting himself as the protector. The responses stung worse. What a devoted son. Your sister ought to feel ashamed. They provided her with so much, she simply demanded even more. They lacked the full context, but they preferred not to hear it. They craved a narrative, and my family supplied one. I might have continued staying silent, allowed the controversy to fade. But then I noticed her name, Kelly, my cousin. The same cousin who once described me as the glue holding this family together. She liked the post and added a heart emoji. Nothing more. That gesture struck deeper than anticipated. Perhaps because I believed she understood. Perhaps because I believed she truly saw me. I shut my laptop, sat in darkness, and for the first time in weeks something inside me fractured. Not dramatically, not chaotically, merely a soft, conclusive snap. They weren't merely revising the tale, they were removing me from its pages entirely. They arrived on a Thursday. I should have anticipated it. Messages had failed, requests for funds had been disregarded. Attempts at inducing guilt had lost potency, so they appeared in person, at 10:42 a.m. The lobby desk phoned. Ms. Rivers, your parents are here, accompanied by a gentleman claiming to be your brother. They're requesting access upstairs. They say it's urgent. I stood in the corridor outside my office, staring at the tiled floor as the receptionist spoke. I drew a slow breath. Please inform them I'm unavailable and they were not expected. A brief pause. They say they'll remain until you speak with them. I nodded, though unseen. Then let them wait. 20 minutes later, my phone vibrated. A message from Mom. We're downstairs. Please open the door. Another. We won't depart until we've spoken. I took my time. I completed the meeting already underway, responded to 2 emails, then descended. They stood clustered near the entrance, positioned closely as though they had practiced the scene. Dad stood rigidly, braced for confrontation. Mom gripped her handbag tightly, eyes darting. Mason appeared as if he preferred being elsewhere. They all pivoted as I emerged. No immediate words. I remained at a distance, arms folded, composed. Angelina, Mom started, voice already strained. We must discuss this. I met her gaze, then looked past her. The street lay calm. A delivery truck passed in the distance with a low rumble. I stayed silent. Dad cleared his throat. You would truly allow us to forfeit the house over this? I permitted the question to linger. Then you truly believed I would. He began to speak, but I interrupted. You excluded me. You transferred everything to Mason. Yet here you stand, expecting the identical assistance I provided unquestioningly for years. Silence answered. Mom advanced slightly, tone gentler. We believed you would comprehend. You've always been resilient, I nodded, and you exploited that resilience as justification to overlook me. Mason muttered something indistinct. I missed parts of it, something about never soliciting any of this. Yet you accepted it, I replied. He averted his eyes. Dad placed hands on hips, irritation rising. We clothed you, fed you, raised you. You owe us, I nearly chuckled. I repaid that obligation monthly, yearly, and still you erased me. Mom's lip quivered. We never intended to cause you pain. I stepped nearer. Then why did you wait until I vanished to acknowledge that I was the one sustaining everything? No response came. Mason moved toward the entrance. I raised a palm. No, you're not entering. You're not welcome upstairs. I will not serve as your solution any longer. No shouting, no tears, only calm. They stood frozen, 3 individuals who once claimed me as family. And I had finished attempting to be visible to people who noticed me only when convenience demanded it. They hadn't lost me the moment the will was altered. They lost me the instant they convinced themselves I would never depart. I never blocked their contacts. It proved unnecessary. The quiet I extended spoke more forcefully than any argument they could offer. They continued texting for a time. Mom attempted gentle appeals. Dad grew sharper, accusatory, insistent. Mason remained largely mute, except for one final text. You believe walking away makes you superior? I left it unanswered. Several days afterward, I went for a walk. No destination, simply motion. Without intending to, my route carried me past the old neighborhood. The familiar street appeared unchanged. Uneven pavement, a fence half-coated in peeling paint, but the house itself. A realtor's sign planted in the front yard, faded window shutters, brown, neglected lawn. I paused on the sidewalk and observed from afar. The porch lamp remained dark. The swing I had repaired was missing. The wind chimes had vanished as well. I kept my distance. I required no closer view to understand the collapse had occurred. That house never sheltered me. I had sheltered it. Now the burden belonged to someone else. As I turned away, my phone vibrated once, then again. I ignored it. I already knew whose names would appear. I permitted the buzzing to continue, pause, resume. Eventually, I retrieved the device and glanced. Missed call, Mom, missed call, Dad, voicemail, one new. I silenced the phone. Returned it to my pocket. No further message required. I already knew its contents. I continued home through the crisp, slow-moving air of a late autumn afternoon, not bitter, not triumphant. Simply liberated. I had never been their safety net. They had merely convinced themselves I would never step away. If someone once relied upon your quiet support yet failed to remember your worth, feel free to leave a heart emoji. Some of us never shouted, yet we still chose to vanish.